Jake Morrison stood in the center of the massive chamber, surrounded by alien beings from across the galaxy. The Galactic Council meeting hall was enormous, with curved walls that reached up into darkness. Thousands of creatures from different worlds sat in rows, all staring down at the single human representative. Jake wore his best diplomatic uniform, but he felt small and insignificant. The aliens around him were impressive. Some were twice his height, others had multiple arms or glowing eyes. The air smelled strange, filled with the scents of dozens of different species breathing the same recycled atmosphere. At the front of the chamber, Chancellor Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire rose from his seat. The massive creature stood over, 8 feet tall, with gray skin and 4 arms. His voice boomed across the chamber when he spoke. "Human Representative Morrison," Vextar began, his voice carrying easily through the hall. "Your species has been found guilty of aggressive expansion and violation of established territorial boundaries. The Council has reached its decision." Jake felt his heart beating faster. He had been expecting this moment for weeks, but hearing the words still made his stomach turn. Around him, alien delegates whispered to each other in languages he could not understand. "The human colonies in the Outer Rim must be abandoned," Vextar continued. "All human settlements beyond your home system will be evacuated. Your species will be confined to Earth and the Sol system. You have 72 hours to begin the evacuation process." Murmurs of approval rippled through the chamber. Jake looked around and saw satisfied expressions on many alien faces. They had been waiting for this moment when humanity would finally be put in its place. "And if we refuse?" Jake asked, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. Vextar's 4 eyes narrowed. "Then the combined fleets of 7 Council species will remove you by force. Your primitive weapons and basic technology will not protect you from our united strength." More aliens voiced their agreement. The Crystalline Nethes delegate spoke up, her voice like singing glass. "Humans have contaminated enough worlds with their crude technology. They spread their violent ways wherever they go." A Velkari representative added his opinion. "They use kinetic weapons and chemical explosives like savages. Their presence in civilized space is an insult to all advanced species." Jake listened to the insults and accusations, keeping his face neutral. He had been trained for this moment, but it was still difficult to hear his entire species described as primitive and violent. In the observation deck high above the chamber floor, Captain Lisa Bennett watched the proceedings through reinforced glass. She wore the dark blue uniform of the Human Space Navy, her rank insignia gleaming under the artificial lights. Her hands were clenched into fists as she listened to the aliens mock her species. 72 hours, she muttered to herself. "They really think they can just push us around like children." Next to her, Colonel Ryan Hayes stood quietly, his arms crossed over his chest. He was a tall man with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. As the head of the most classified military project in human history, he knew secrets that would shock the aliens below. "Let them talk," Ryan said quietly. "Let them think they have us cornered." Lisa looked at him with curiosity. "You sound like you know something they don't." Ryan smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. "They think we're still using the same technology we had when we first met them 20 years ago. They think we've made no progress, no improvements." "Haven't we?" Lisa asked. "Captain, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels," Ryan said. "In 3 days, when their deadline expires, the galaxy is going to learn something new about humanity." Down in the chamber, Jake was making his final statement to the Council. "The human government will consider your ultimatum," he said formally. "We will provide our answer within the specified time frame." Vextar nodded with satisfaction. "Good. Perhaps your species can learn to accept its proper place in the galactic order?" The session was declared closed, and aliens began filing out of the chamber. Many were talking excitedly about the coming human evacuation. Some were already discussing how to divide up the abandoned human colonies. Jake remained on the chamber floor as the crowds dispersed. He activated his communication device and sent a coded message to Earth. The message was simple: "Package delivery confirmed." 72 hours to arrival. Far from the Galactic Council chambers in a hidden facility. Built inside a large asteroid, Lieutenant Commander Amy Parker was running the final tests on humanity's greatest secret. The asteroid looked like any other piece of space rock from the outside, but inside it contained the most advanced military laboratory ever built. Amy stood in a massive testing chamber, wearing something that looked like a second skin made of dark metal. The Mark III battle armor was sleek and form-fitting, unlike the bulky exoskeletons that humans were known to use. Every surface of the armor seemed to shimmer with internal energy. "Computer, begin test sequence 47, Amy," said the chamber around her transformed. Holographic enemy fighters appeared, firing simulated weapons at her position. Amy moved like lightning, her armored form dancing between the energy blasts. The armor systems analyzed each attack, learning and adapting in real time. A blast that should have destroyed her instead passed harmlessly around her body. The armor had learned to bend the energy around itself, making her effectively invisible to that type of weapon. "Incredible," breathed Dr. Susan Cole, watching from the observation room. "The adaptive systems are working perfectly. The armor is learning faster than we hoped." The test ended, and Amy landed softly on the chamber floor. She removed her helmet, revealing the face of a woman in her 30s with short brown hair and determined eyes. "How did it feel?" Dr. Cole asked through the communication system. "Like I could take on an entire alien fleet by myself?" Amy replied. "This armor doesn't just protect me. It makes me stronger, faster, smarter. I can feel the systems working with my mind, anticipating what I need before I even think of it." Dr. Cole smiled. "That's exactly what we designed it to do. The Mark III isn't just armor. It's a partnership between human intuition and advanced technology." Meanwhile, aboard the human cruiser Defiant, Captain Lisa Bennett was receiving new orders. The ship had been positioned near the edge of human space, apparently as part of a defensive line. To any alien observers, it looked like humanity was preparing for a desperate last stand. "Captain," her communication officer reported, "we're receiving coded transmissions from Admiral Command. Operation Mockingbird is now active," Lisa nodded. She had been briefed on the operation, though she didn't know all the details. Humanity's colonies would appear to evacuate, their military forces would seem to fall back in panic, and the aliens would believe they had won an easy victory. The Zephyrian war fleet was already moving toward human space. Admiral Kexron commanded. Over 300 ships, including battle cruisers that could destroy entire cities with single shots. The fleet represented the combined military might of 7 different species, united in their desire to put humanity in its place. Aboard his flagship, Admiral Kexron studied reports about human military capabilities. The information was 20 years old, but the aliens believed it was still accurate. Humans used kinetic weapons that fired metal bullets. They had basic energy shields that could be overwhelmed by sustained fire. Their armor was primitive compared to alien technology. "This will be easier than expected," Kexron told his staff. "The humans have no chance against our combined forces." His intelligence officer agreed. "Our scouts report that human colonies are already beginning to evacuate. They know they cannot fight us." Back on the asteroid facility, Colonel Ryan Hayes watched the final preparations for humanity's revelation. 200 Mark III operators were completing their final briefings. Each one was a volunteer, selected from the best soldiers in human space. "Tomorrow," Ryan announced to the assembled troops, "the galaxy learns what humanity is really capable of. For 20 years, we've let them think we were primitive. We've let them believe we were weak. Tomorrow, we show them the truth." The operators listened in silence, their faces serious. They knew they were about to change the course of galactic history. As the 72-hour deadline approached, both sides prepared for what was coming. The aliens expected an easy victory over a primitive species. The humans prepared to reveal a secret that would shock the galaxy. The stage was set for humanity's greatest revelation. The message reached Earth 12 hours after the Galactic Council session ended. In a secure bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, General William Carter read the coded transmission from Ambassador Morrison. The simple words "package delivery confirmed" meant that humanity's greatest deception was about to begin. General Carter activated the red communication panel on his desk. Within seconds, he was connected to military commanders across human space. The faces of dozens of officers appeared on screens around the room, all waiting for the order they had been preparing for. "Gentlemen and ladies," General Carter began, "Operation Mockingbird is now active. Begin Phase 1 immediately." Across human space, the carefully planned retreat began. On colony worlds that had been home to humans for decades, evacuation ships started loading civilians. The process looked panicked and desperate, but every detail had been planned months in advance. Captain Lisa Bennett received her orders aboard the Defiant. Her ship was to retreat toward the inner colonies, making it appear that humanity was abandoning its outer territories. The retreat would look convincing because it was partially real. Real families were leaving their homes, real tears were shed as people said goodbye to the worlds they had built, but the retreat served another purpose. It was designed to draw the alien fleet into a trap. Colonel Ryan Hayes stood in the command center of the asteroid facility, watching status reports from across the galaxy. Production lines that had been hidden for 5 years were now working at maximum capacity. The Mark III armor project was no longer a secret experiment. It was becoming humanity's salvation. "How many suits are ready?" he asked Dr. Susan Cole. 250 completed units, she replied. "Another 100 will be finished within 24 hours. Ryan nodded with satisfaction. The Mark III project had consumed enormous resources and required the work of thousands of people. The secrecy had been perfect. Not even most human military officers knew about the armor's existence. The technology behind the Mark III was revolutionary. Traditional armor tried to stop enemy attacks with thick plates and energy shields. The Mark III took a completely different approach. Instead of stopping attacks, it analyzed them and adapted to make them harmless. Dr. Cole explained the system to a group of new operators. "Think of it as living armor," she said. "The nanotechnology in each suit can examine any weapon fired at you and create a defense in milliseconds. Energy weapons become powerless. Kinetic weapons are deflected. Even exotic alien technologies can be countered once the suit learns how they work." Lieutenant Commander Amy Parker was demonstrating the armor's capabilities to a group of military observers. She stood in the testing chamber while automated systems fired different types of weapons at her position. Plasma bolts that should have vaporized her simply passed around her body like water flowing around a stone. "The armor doesn't just protect you," Amy explained as the test ended. "It makes you stronger, faster, and smarter. The neural interface connects directly to your brain, giving you information about everything happening around you." One of the observers, a general from the Earth Defense Force, shook his head in amazement. "How is this possible?" 20 years ago, we were using chemical rockets to reach orbit," Dr. Cole smiled. "We've been studying alien technology since our first contact. Every piece of wreckage from crashed ships, every energy signature from alien weapons, every scrap of information we could gather. We've been learning while they assumed we were staying primitive. The deception had been necessary. If the aliens had known about human technological progress, they would have acted sooner and with more caution. By appearing weak and backward, humanity had bought time to develop weapons that could surprise their enemies. Meanwhile, the Zephyrian fleet was approaching human space with confidence. Admiral Kexron stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display show human colonies evacuating. The sight filled him with satisfaction. "Look at them run," he told his staff. 20 years of expansion, and they abandon it all at the first sign of serious opposition. His intelligence officer reported the latest observations. Human ships are retreating toward their inner colonies. Their defensive positions are weak and poorly organized. They're using the same outdated technology they had when we first met. Admiral Kexron nodded. "Kinetic weapons and basic energy shields. Their armor is primitive metal plates that our weapons can cut through like paper. This campaign will be over quickly." The alien fleet included ships from 7 different species, each contributing their most advanced weapons. The Zephyrians brought their particle beam cannons. The Velkari had gravity manipulation devices that could crush ships like tin cans. The crystalline Nethys contributed photonic disruptors that could tear apart molecular bonds. Together, they represented the most powerful military force ever assembled in the galaxy. Against primitive humans with outdated weapons, it seemed like overwhelming force, but the humans had a different perspective on the situation. Captain Steve Rogers, one of the Mark III operators, was briefing his squad on their target assignments. His unit would be responsible for taking out the Zephyrian command ships. "Remember," Steve told his team, "they think we're using the same equipment we had 20 years ago. They expect kinetic weapons and basic armor. When we hit them with the Mark III capabilities, they won't know what happened." The Mark III armor gave its operators abilities that seemed impossible. They could fly through space without ships, powered by miniaturized fusion reactors. They could survive in any environment, from the surface of stars to the vacuum of space. Most importantly, they could learn and adapt to any weapon system in real time. Sergeant Peter Glenn was completing his final training session with the armor. The neural interface felt strange at first, like having another mind connected to his own, but as he practiced, the connection became natural. "I can feel everything," he told his instructor. "The armor knows what I'm thinking before I do. It's like having the reflexes of a computer and the intuition of a human working together." The instructor nodded. "That's exactly what we designed it to do. The Mark III doesn't replace human judgment, it enhances it." As the alien fleet moved deeper into human space, they began to encounter the retreating human forces. The encounters were brief and one-sided. Human ships would fire a few shots with kinetic weapons, then retreat when the aliens returned fire. It looked like panic and desperation. Admiral Kexron watched the skirmishes with growing confidence. "They're not even trying to fight seriously," he observed. "Their ships retreat after the first exchange of fire." What he didn't know was that the retreating human ships were collecting data. Every alien weapon that fired was analyzed by hidden sensors. The information was sent back to the Mark III development team, who used it to update the armor's defensive systems. Dr. Cole worked frantically to incorporate the new data into the armor's programming. "Perfect," she muttered as she watched the analysis complete. "Now we know exactly how their weapons work. The armor will be able to counter everything they have." The deception was working perfectly. The aliens believed they were chasing a defeated enemy toward an inevitable surrender. They had no idea that they were walking into the most sophisticated trap in galactic history. On the colony world of New Dakota, the evacuation was nearly complete. The planet looked abandoned, with empty cities and vacant farmland. But hidden beneath the surface, Mark III operators waited in concealed bunkers. The planet that appeared defenseless was actually humanity's strongest fortress. Colonel Hayes reviewed the final preparations from his command center. "All units report ready," he announced. "The alien fleet will reach New Dakota in 18 hours. That's when we spring the trap." The countdown had begun. For 20 years, humanity had appeared weak and primitive while secretly developing the most advanced military technology in the galaxy. In 18 hours, the deception would end and the galaxy would learn what humans were really capable of. The aliens expected to find a defeated enemy waiting for surrender. Instead, they would discover that humanity had been preparing for this moment since the day they first met alien species. The Mark III armor represented more than just advanced technology. It was proof that humans could adapt, learn, and overcome any challenge. The stage was set for the greatest surprise in galactic military history. The alien fleet arrived at New Dakota exactly on schedule. Admiral Kexron stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the tactical display with satisfaction. The human colony world floated before them, apparently defenseless and abandoned. "Sensors show minimal activity," reported his tactical officer. "A few human ships in standard defensive positions. Their formations are textbook basic, nothing we haven't seen before." Admiral Kexron nodded. "Just as expected. They're making one last desperate stand with their primitive weapons." Around the planet, the human defensive line looked exactly like something from a military training manual. Old-style cruisers and destroyers hung in space in predictable patterns. Their weapons were the same kinetic cannons and basic energy systems that aliens had been seeing for 20 years. Captain Lisa Bennett stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching the alien fleet approach. Her ship was positioned with the other human vessels, playing its role in the deception. But she knew that in a few minutes everything would change. "All stations report ready," her communications officer announced. Lisa nodded. "Signal the fleet." Operation Mockingbird Phase 2 begins in 60 seconds. Hidden beneath the surface of New Dakota, Colonel Ryan Hayes watched the countdown timer reach 0. Around him, technicians monitored screens showing the positions of every Mark III operator scattered across the planet and in orbit. "All units, this is command," Ryan spoke into his microphone. "Execute Phase 2. Show them what humanity really is." The first sign that something was wrong came from the Zephyrian fighter squadrons. 200 small attack craft launched from the alien fleet, racing toward the human defensive positions. The pilots were confident, expecting to sweep aside the primitive human forces in minutes. Captain Steve Rogers felt the Mark III armor systems activate around him. He was hidden inside what looked like a damaged communications tower on New Dakota's surface, but his armor sensors could track every alien fighter approaching the planet. "Target acquired," he whispered to his team through the neural link. "Beginning intercept." The Mark III armor's flight system engaged, launching Steve into space at impossible speed. To the alien pilots, he appeared as nothing more than a small object rising from the planet's surface. They ignored him completely, focusing on the human ships ahead. That mistake lasted exactly 17 seconds. Steve's armor analyzed the alien fighters as he approached. The systems identified their weapon types, shield frequencies, and structural weaknesses in milliseconds. By the time he reached the first squadron, the armor had already developed perfect countermeasures. The alien pilot never saw what hit him. One moment he was flying toward the human fleet. The next moment his fighter was torn apart by weapons that seemed to ignore his shields completely. Steve moved through the squadron like a predator among prey, his armor adapting to every defensive measure they tried. "Squadron leader to fleet command," came the panicked transmission. "We're under attack by unknown forces. Our weapons have no effect. They're cutting through our shields like they don't exist." Admiral Kexron stared at the tactical display in confusion. His fighter squadrons were being destroyed, but the sensors showed no human ships in the area. The only contacts were small objects that moved faster than anything in his database. "What are those things?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir," his tactical officer replied. "They're too small to be ships, but they're moving at speeds that should be impossible for any known technology." More Mark III operators were launching from hidden positions across the planet. Lieutenant Commander Amy Parker rose from beneath the surface of New Dakota's largest ocean, her armor systems switching seamlessly from underwater to space operations. "This is beautiful," she said to herself as the armor's flight systems carried her toward the alien fleet. 20 years of hiding, and now they finally get to see what we can do. The alien fleet began to realize that they were facing something unprecedented. Energy weapons that should have vaporized any human target were being absorbed or deflected by the approaching figures. Kinetic weapons passed through them harmlessly. Even the exotic technologies that the various species had brought to the battle seemed useless. Dr. Susan Cole watched the battle from the command center, monitoring the performance of every Mark III suit in real time. The armor's adaptive systems were working beyond her wildest expectations. Each suit was learning not just from its own encounters, but sharing information with all the others through quantum communication links. "Incredible," she whispered. "They're not just adapting to individual weapons. They're learning to counter entire technological approaches." The Valkyrie ships deployed their gravity manipulation weapons, creating crushing fields that should have flattened any human technology. Instead, they watched in horror as the Mark III operators seemed to surf through the gravity waves, using the alien technology to increase their own speed and maneuverability. "Commander," Alex Turner felt his armor analyze the gravity weapon as it struck him. Instead of being crushed, he found himself accelerated toward the enemy ship at tremendous velocity. The armor had learned to use the Valkyrie technology against them. "Thanks for the boost," he said as he punched through the alien ship's hull with his bare hands. The crystalline Nethys tried their photonic disruptors next. The weapons were designed to tear apart molecular bonds, reducing any target to its basic atoms. The beams struck the Mark III operators directly, and for a moment the aliens thought they had found an effective weapon. Instead, the operators emerged from the energy beams completely unharmed. The armor had analyzed the photonic disruption and learned to restructure itself at the molecular level to resist the effect. What should have been an instant kill became nothing more than a light show. Sergeant Peter Glenn laughed as he flew through another photonic beam. "My armor just learned to eat their best weapon," he reported. "This is better than the simulations." The alien fleet began to panic. Every species had contributed their most advanced weapons, and nothing was working. The small human figures moved through their formations like ghosts, destroying ships with ease while remaining completely invulnerable to return fire. Admiral Kexron watched his fleet being torn apart by forces he couldn't understand. "How is this possible?" he demanded. 20 years ago, these humans were using chemical rockets. Now they have technology that makes our best weapons useless. His science officer was frantically analyzing the sensor data. "Admiral, these aren't ships. They appear to be individual humans in some kind of advanced armor. The technology is beyond anything in our databases." "Individual humans?" Kexron stared at the tactical display. "You're telling me that single human soldiers are destroying our battle cruisers?" "That appears to be correct, sir." The Mark III operators moved through the alien fleet like a force of nature. Each armor system was constantly learning, adapting, and improving. Weapons that might have been effective against the first operator were useless against the second, because the armor had already shared the countermeasures with the entire force. "Captain." Steve Rogers approached the alien flagship, his armor sensors analyzing the massive ship's defenses. The Zephyrian vessel was protected by energy shields that could stop entire fleets, but the Mark III armor had already learned to phase through energy barriers. "Flagship, this is Rogers," he transmitted to the other operators. "I'm going to pay Admiral Kexron a personal visit." Steve passed through the flagship's shields like they were made of air. The ship's point defense systems fired frantically, but their energy beams simply made his armor stronger. He landed on the hull and began walking toward the bridge, his boots cutting through the armored plating with each step. Inside the ship, alarms were screaming. Admiral Kexron watched in disbelief as his flagship's hull was breached by a single human soldier walking through it like it was made of paper. "Sir, the human is approaching the bridge," reported his security chief. "Our weapons have no effect on his armor." Admiral Kexron felt a cold fear growing in his chest. The human fleet had seemed so weak, so primitive. How had they developed technology that made his most advanced weapons useless? The answer was walking through his ship's hull, getting closer to the bridge with every step. Humanity had been hiding their true capabilities for 20 years, and now the galaxy was about to learn what they were really capable of. The revelation was complete. The species that the aliens had dismissed as primitive savages had just demonstrated technology that surpassed anything in the galaxy. The Mark III armor wasn't just a weapon. It was proof that humanity had been playing a much longer game than anyone had imagined. 3 days after the battle at New Dakota, Ambassador Jake Morrison walked into the Galactic Council chambers once again. At this time, everything was different. The same aliens who had been mocking humanity just a week before now watched him. With fear and respect, the chamber was quieter than Jake had ever seen it. Delegates whispered nervously to each other, their confidence completely shattered. News of the battle had spread across the galaxy, and everyone knew that the balance of power had changed forever. Chancellor Vextar stood at his podium, but he no longer looked like the powerful leader who had delivered humanity's ultimatum. His 4 arms trembled slightly as he spoke. "Ambassador Morrison," Vextar began, his voice much softer than before. The Council has reconsidered its position regarding human territorial claims. Jake smiled politely. I'm glad to hear that. Chancellor, what exactly has the Council decided? We acknowledge that there may have been misunderstandings about human technological capabilities, Vextar continued. The Council is prepared to discuss new terms for human membership. Around the chamber, alien delegates nodded eagerly. The Valkyrie representative who had called humans primitive savages was now looking at Jake like he might explode at any moment. The crystalline Nethys delegate sang nervous harmonies instead of the confident melodies she had used before. That's very thoughtful, Jake replied. But I'm afraid humanity's position has also changed. We're no longer interested in simply joining the Council as junior members. The chamber fell completely silent. Every alien in the room was staring at the human ambassador, waiting to hear what humanity wanted now that they had proven their strength. What are your terms? Vextar asked quietly. Jake activated a holographic display that showed a map of the galaxy. Large sections were highlighted in blue, representing human territorial claims. The area was much larger than what humanity had controlled before the battle. First, all human colonies remain under human control, Jake announced. Second, humanity claims exclusive rights to these additional sectors for future expansion. Third, any species that wishes to enter human space must request permission first. The alien delegates began talking frantically among themselves. The territories Jake was claiming included some of the richest resource systems in the galaxy. But after seeing what human technology could do, none of them dared to object directly. Fourth, Jake continued, humanity will establish permanent military bases in neutral space to ensure galactic peace. And fifth, the Council will formally apologize for its previous treatment of the human species. Admiral Kexron, who had survived the battle but lost most of his fleet, stood up in the Zephyrian section. You cannot be serious, he protested. You're demanding that we treat you as equals to species that have been spacefaring for thousands of years. Jake turned to look at the alien admiral. Admiral, with respect, we're not asking to be treated as equals. The battle at New Dakota proved that we're not equals. We're asking to be treated according to our actual capabilities. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Every alien in the chamber understood what Jake was really saying. Humanity wasn't just claiming equal status. They were claiming to be superior. Dr. Susan Cole was addressing a gathering of alien scientists in a separate chamber. The meeting had been requested by the Council's Science Committee, who desperately wanted to understand how humans had achieved such advanced technology. The Mark III armor represents a completely different approach to military technology, Dr. Cole explained. Instead of building static defenses, we created adaptive systems that learn and improve in real time. The alien scientists listened with a mixture of fascination and fear. The technology Dr. Cole was describing challenged everything they thought. They knew about physics and engineering. But how did you develop this so quickly? Asked the lead Nethi scientist. 20 years ago, your species was barely capable of interplanetary travel. Dr. Cole smiled. We had excellent teachers. Every piece of alien technology we encountered, every weapon fired at our ships, every energy signature we detected, we studied it all and learned how to do it better. The alien scientists began to understand the full scope of what had happened. While they had been dismissing humans as primitive, humanity had been quietly reverse engineering and improving upon technologies that had taken other species millennia to develop. Captain Lisa Bennett was meeting with representatives from several alien military forces. The officers who had once looked down on human tactics were now asking for advice on how to improve their own forces. The key is adaptability, Lisa explained. Your species tend to perfect one type of technology and then stick with it for centuries. Humans are always looking for ways to do things differently. A Valkyrie general asked, but how do you coordinate so many different technological approaches? Our forces require standardized equipment and tactics. That's exactly the problem, Lisa replied. Standardization makes you predictable. The Mark III armor works because each suit can adapt to any situation independently while sharing information with all the others. Meanwhile, Colonel Ryan Hayes was overseeing the expansion of the Mark III program. The success at New Dakota had proven the armor's effectiveness, and now humanity was preparing to equip much larger forces. "How many suits can we produce?" he asked Dr. Cole during their daily briefing. "With the new facilities coming online, we should be able to outfit 50,000 operators within 6 months," she replied. "The aliens' own technology is helping us improve our manufacturing processes," Ryan nodded with satisfaction. 50,000 Mark III operators would make humanity the dominant military force in the galaxy. No species would dare to threaten human interests again. The political changes were happening just as rapidly. Species that had been enemies of humanity for years were now requesting defensive alliances. The Thorian Empire, which had refused to trade with humans, was offering exclusive mining rights in exchange for protection. Ambassador Morrison was receiving delegation after delegation of alien representatives, all wanting to secure good relationships with humanity before it was too late. The Kresh Confederacy would like to propose a mutual defense treaty, announced their ambassador, a reptilian creature who had previously called humans a contaminating influence. The Mixtec Republic offers full access to our quantum research facilities, added another delegate who had once voted to restrict human expansion. Jake listened to each offer politely, but he was in no hurry to make decisions. For 20 years, these species had held all the power and used it to limit human growth. Now that the situation was reversed, humanity could afford to be selective about their partnerships. The most significant change was in how individual aliens viewed humans. Before the battle, humans had been seen as amusing primitives who had gotten lucky with space travel. Now they were viewed with a mixture of respect, fear, and awe. Captain Steve Rogers was experiencing this firsthand during a diplomatic mission to the Zephyrian homeworld. Everywhere he went, aliens stared at him with wide eyes, whispering to each other about the human who had single-handedly boarded their most powerful warship. "It's strange," he reported to Colonel Hayes. "A week ago, these same aliens wouldn't have bothered to learn my name. Now they treat me like I'm some kind of legendary warrior." The truth was that humans had become legendary. The story of the Mark III armor and the battle at New Dakota was spreading across the galaxy, growing more impressive with each telling. Humanity had gone from being nobody important to being the most talked about species in galactic history, but perhaps the most important change was in humanity itself. For the first time since leaving Earth, humans could stand proud among the stars. They no longer had to apologize for their presence or accept being treated as second-class citizens. The galaxy had learned that underestimating humanity was a dangerous mistake. The species that had been dismissed as primitive had proven that they could not only survive among advanced civilizations, but could surpass them when necessary. As Ambassador Morrison concluded his presentation to the Galactic Council, he looked around the chamber at the alien faces watching him. Fear, respect, and uncertainty were written on every one of them. "The age of human expansion has begun," he announced. "We look forward to working with all species who are willing to treat us with the respect we have earned. The galaxy would never be the same." 6 months had passed since the battle at New Dakota, and the galaxy was still trying to understand the new reality. Humanity had gone from being the weakest member of galactic civilization to its most powerful force in a single day. The changes were visible everywhere. In the Galactic Council chambers, the seating arrangement had been completely reorganized. Ambassador Jake Morrison now sat in the front row, in a chair that had been reserved for the most senior species. The Zephyrian Chancellor still held his position, but everyone understood that real power had shifted to the human representative. "Today we discuss the establishment of the Human Defense Initiative," Jake announced to the assembled delegates. "This program will place human military bases in strategic locations throughout the galaxy to maintain peace and stability." The alien delegates listened carefully, taking notes on every word. 6 months ago, they would have laughed at the idea of humans telling them what to do. Now they competed with each other to show support for human proposals. The Velkari ambassador raised one of his four hands. The Velkari Empire fully supports this initiative. We offer 3-star systems in our territory for human bases. The Nether Republic offers 5 systems, quickly added the crystalline delegate. Not wanting to be outdone, Jake nodded politely at each offer. The transformation in alien attitudes was remarkable. Species that had once demanded humanity's removal from space were now begging for human protection. Captain Lisa Bennett was overseeing the construction of the first human starbase in neutral territory. The facility was enormous, larger than most alien cities. It would house 10,000 Mark III operators and serve as a training center for new recruits. The fabrication units are working perfectly, reported her chief engineer. We're using Zephyrian manufacturing technology, but our improvements have made it 3 times more efficient than the original design. Lisa smiled as she watched the construction. The aliens had unknowingly provided the tools for their own replacement at the top of the galactic hierarchy. Every piece of technology they had shared with humans had been studied, improved, and incorporated into human systems. Dr. Susan Cole was working in her expanded laboratory, now the size of a small moon. The success of the Mark III armor had led to unlimited funding for her research projects. She was developing new technologies that would keep humanity ahead of any potential threats. The Mark IV prototypes are showing excellent results, she told Colonel Ryan Hayes during their weekly briefing. The new suits can adapt not just to weapons but to entire technological paradigms. They learn faster and share information more efficiently. Ryan nodded with satisfaction. How many species have requested access to our armor technology? All of them, Susan replied. But I recommend we continue our policy of selective sharing. We give them enough to make them dependent on us, but never enough to challenge us. The strategy was working perfectly. Alien species were slowly becoming reliant on human technology and protection. What had started as humanity proving its strength was evolving into a new form of galactic government with humans at the center. Lieutenant Commander Amy Parker was leading a training exercise with new Mark III operators. The program had expanded to include volunteers from friendly alien species, though they received older versions of the armor with limited capabilities. Remember, Amy told the mixed group of human and alien trainees, the armor enhances your natural abilities. Humans adapt quickly, which is why our suits are more advanced. Other species have different strengths. A young Nethys trainee raised her crystalline hand. Commander, why are human suits more powerful than ours? Amy considered her answer carefully. The truth was that human brains worked differently than alien minds. The neural interface that made the Mark III so effective required the kind of flexible thinking that humans excelled at. Alien minds were often too specialized to handle the armor's adaptive systems. Each species gets armor designed for their specific capabilities, Amy replied diplomatically. Humans happen to be well suited for adaptive technology. The trainee seemed satisfied with this explanation, though Amy suspected she didn't fully understand the implications. The Mark III armor had been designed specifically around human cognitive abilities. Other species could use simplified versions, but they would never match human performance. Meanwhile, the political transformation of the galaxy continued. Species that had once formed alliances against humanity were now competing for human favor. The old power structures were crumbling as everyone scrambled to align themselves with the new dominant force. Admiral Kexron, who had survived the disaster at New Dakota, was meeting with human military advisors. His pride had been completely broken by the defeat, and now he sought human approval for all major decisions. The Zephyrian fleet requests permission to upgrade our weapons systems using human technology, he said humbly to Captain Steve Rogers, the same human who had boarded his flagship during the battle. Steve looked at the alien admiral with amusement. We can provide some basic improvements to your energy weapons. Nothing too advanced, of course. We wouldn't want you to accidentally hurt yourselves. The condescending tone would have triggered a war 6 months earlier. Now Kexron simply nodded gratefully. We appreciate any assistance humanity can provide. The economic changes were just as dramatic as the political ones. Human corporations were establishing trade dominance throughout the galaxy. Alien businesses competed desperately for contracts with human companies. Knowing that such partnerships guaranteed success, the Thorian Mining Consortium, once one of the galaxy's most powerful economic forces, was now essentially a subsidiary of Human Industrial Solutions. They provided raw materials in exchange for access to human manufacturing technology that was decades ahead of their own capabilities. We process 10 times more ore than before the partnership, the Thorian trade minister explained to his government. Human efficiency improvements have revolutionized our entire industry. What he didn't mention was that the humans now controlled the most valuable aspects of the operation. The Thorians provided muscle and basic materials while humans handled the advanced processing and kept the most profitable technologies for themselves. Dr. Cole was developing new civilian technologies that further increased human influence. Medical devices that could cure diseases no alien technology could touch. Manufacturing systems that produced goods of impossible quality. Communication networks that connected the entire galaxy with unprecedented speed and clarity. Each innovation makes other species more dependent on us, she explained to the Human Science Council. They're not just buying our products. They're becoming unable to function without them. The strategy extended beyond mere economic dominance. Human educational systems were spreading throughout the galaxy, teaching alien children human languages, values, and ways of thinking. Cultural exchange programs brought young aliens to human worlds, where they learned to see humanity as the natural leaders of galactic civilization. Ambassador Morrison was reviewing reports from across human space. The expansion was proceeding ahead of schedule. New colonies were being established in the most desirable systems, often with eager alien assistance. Species competed to host human settlements, knowing that such colonies brought prosperity and protection. The Kresh Confederacy has offered us an entire sector in exchange for a permanent human presence, reported his assistant. They're worried about Mixique expansion in their region. Jake smiled. The old conflicts between alien species were becoming opportunities for human expansion. Instead of fighting each other directly, aliens now competed to gain human support for their disputes. The most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed the future. For thousands of years, technological progress had been slow and incremental. Species would develop new technologies over centuries, sharing them cautiously with trusted allies. Humanity had shattered this model. Human technology advanced so rapidly that alien scientists couldn't keep up. Innovations that should have taken decades were being developed in months. The pace of change was accelerating beyond anything the galaxy had ever experienced. We're not just changing the balance of power, Colonel Hayes observed during a strategy meeting. We're changing the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. The observation was accurate. The galaxy was becoming more dynamic, more competitive, and more innovative. Old traditions of slow, careful progress were being replaced by human style. Rapid adaptation and improvement. As Jake Morrison prepared for another council session, he reflected on humanity's journey. 2 years ago, humans had been struggling for basic recognition. Now they were reshaping the galaxy according to their vision of progress and efficiency. The transformation was complete, but it was also just beginning. Humanity had proven that they belonged among the stars, but they had done more than that. They had proven that they belonged at the front, leading the galaxy into a new age of technological advancement and exploration. The age of human dominance had begun.